All right, it is 10 o'clock. So I will go ahead and get started here on, we'll just continue allowing people to join us as we go here. Just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are the Southeast Pennsylvania PTAC. We're one of about 95 PTACs located throughout the United States and its territory. Our program is funded by the Defense Logistics Agency to assist businesses in doing business with the government. So we serve the counties of Southeast Pennsylvania. If you are outside of our territory, you can find your local PTAC with a quick Google search for the APTAC, that's APTAC, and they have a Find Your PTAC tool. Or you could also just reach out to us and we will be happy to connect you with your local PTAC. Presenting today is Richard Leffler from the VA, and he is going to be obviously talking today about the basics of doing business with the VA. All attendees are muted. We invite you to put your questions in the chat, and we will address questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over now to Richard Leffler from the VA. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Richard, I think you are still muted.
There we go. There we go.
All right, yep, we can hear you now.
Great. Hey, everyone. As Josh said, I'm Richard Leffler, and I'm the Small Business Specialist for the Veterans Affairs, more specifically NCO4, which stands for Network Contracting Office, but don't worry about that. It consists primarily of Pennsylvania and Wilmington, Delaware. There are about 20 NCOs throughout the country. Oh, if you hear any barking, it's just our wonderfully enthusiastic dog, Gary. I have to tell you, I'm a terrible speaker, and I avoid it like the plague, which is actually quite apropos at the moment. However, I do know small business. I know the small business world as well as the federal government procurement. And I really like helping people. So instead of giving you numbers and statistics that people like me usually provide, I'm actually going to help by taking a more practical and strategic approach. Let's make something clear. There's a huge chasm that exists between the federal government and small business. I'm sure you've witnessed that. Many in the VA have worked in government their entire career, and that's what they know. While I do work for the government, the majority of my career has been in the private sector, in the small business world. I've owned and operated a small business. I've been a small business consultant. I've worked for a large multi-billion-dollar business and managing their investments in small business. So I know what it's like to have to meet payroll, to manage the insurance audits, secure a loan from the bank, hire and terminate employees, compete with other businesses, and so on. So I really put myself in your shoes. And it's obvious to me why you're here, and it's to get work. It's really that simple. And
Richard, we lost your audio. You are muted again.
There we go. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know, it mutes. Anyway, so today, one of the things I'm going to try to do is, in a way, deprogram everybody, because a a lot of the information that comes out of federal government agencies is, if we're as small business is concerned anyway, it just sends you on the wrong track. So, but anyway, so trying to do business with the VA or any other federal government is very confusing. There's actually far too much information, in my opinion. If you'd ask 10 VA employees about it, for instance, you'd probably get 10 different answers. I'm sure you've experienced this, and you wouldn't be alone, believe me. I'm telling you that because it doesn't have to be confusing. I'm tempted to instruct you to open the window and toss everything out that you've learned from the government. But I'm sure you've gotten some good advice from others, hopefully. Anyway, let me get you back on track if you're not headed in the right direction. Next slide, please, Josh. Most government officials will have you focus on all the wrong areas. They'll explain the federal government or federal acquisition regulations. They'll explain the fact that you need to be registered in SAM, how to choose a NAICS code. They'll tell you to get certified as a women-owned small business or a veteran-owned small business. You might get instructed to get on the federal supply schedule, for instance, and so on. These are listed on the right side of the slide. These are the kind of things that many refer to as the red tape. Folks, let me tell you, your response to the questions on the left will be the determining factors whether or not you'll get work. As for the questions on the right, eventually, while some of this is necessary, it should be an afterthought. This should not be your primary focus. Focus on the actual business first. Repeat, focus on your business. The considerations on the left will determine your success or lack of. Considerations on the right, on the other hand, while they're necessary, won't determine whether or not you'll get work. You'd be surprised that many people in the VA contracting will tell you the exact opposite, because that's what they know. They're experts in contracting and federal acquisition regulations, not in business. In the private sector, your biggest concerns are usually things like, who's our competition? Is our product or service better than our competition's? Can I articulate why? Will XYZ companies sign up for our services? Why or why not? Why would anyone in the VA want to listen to me? These questions are fundamental to your business success. It's no different than what you do in the private sector. So let me ask you some questions. Is your product or service better? And can you demonstrate why it's better? Does your product or service save time? And can you document that? Does your product or service make the nurses or doctor's job easier, for instance? Is your product or service significantly less expensive yet as good as what the VA has now? Does your product reduce infections? Do your services reduce accidents? Is your product or service safer for patients and hospital employees? Is your service on call 24 hours a day? Or does your product or service have a sustainable competitive advantage? People, solve a problem, make someone's life easier, put yourself in your customer's shoes. Why would you want to listen? Again, focus your energies on the actual business, on your product and services. Don't waste your time dealing with the red tape. There's something called the law of triviality. I'm sure some of you have heard this. It states that sometimes people within an organization give disproportionate weight to trivial issues. A famous example, let's say a committee whose job was to approve the plans for a nuclear power plant spent the majority of its time on discussions about relatively minor but easy to grasp issues, such as what materials to use for the staff bicycle shed, while neglecting the proposed design of the power plant itself, which obviously is far more important and complex. Hey, I'm not necessarily saying that getting procurement ready is trivial, but, well, maybe I am, but forget about the bicycle shed until you've got a solid design for the nuclear power plant. VA procurement culture, when it comes to small business anyway, unfortunately focuses much of the attention on contracting instead of business. Don't get bike shedded, so to speak. I don't believe that's a word, but you get my point. So now let's take a look at the VA. Next slide, please. The VA is broken down into two entities. The VISN, which stands for Veterans Integrated Service Network. Again, not important. Think of the VISN as the hospital side. They are the people that work in the hospital. Then we have the NCO. Think of the NCO as the entity that creates contracts, the pencil pusher, so to speak. I'm oversimplifying things, but do not worry about this or focus on this right now. I'll explain further in a couple of slides and break it down for you. But for now, just think of the VA as divided into these two entities. The VA has community-based outpatient clinics, dental clinics, and various other entities spread out all over the state. And as for what we buy pretty much everything. Surgical sponges, air conditioner bearings, bed bugs, sniffing dogs, Catholic priest services, maintenance services for ultrasound machines, small plumbing and electrical products, etc. All you need to know is it's a lot. We buy a lot of everything. Now about NCO4, which I represent, we're exceptionally small business friendly for all socioeconomic categories, not just veteran-owned small businesses. Many think that we only use veteran-owned small businesses or VOSBs, but that certainly is not the case. We really need all types of small business. Part of my job as a small business specialist is to maximize small business utilization and make sure that small businesses like you are always considered first. And fortunately for me and others, the NCO4 leadership is the best. They're really fantastic. They've been instrumental in developing this kind of small business first culture. In fact, NCO4 was recently recognized by the SBA for its work with small business. And if you know the SBA, that's no small feat. Next slide, please. So, as a small business, you've examined those critical business considerations we previously discussed. And it makes good business sense to work with the government, and you decide to move forward. Now is the time to get procurement ready, to wrestle with the red tape. If you're procurement ready, you're good to go. You've registered in SAM, you have a DUNS number, you have the appropriate NAICS codes, a capability statement, you're registered as a women-owned small business or a VOSB, or you've entered your business in the SBA's dynamic small business search database, and so on. Your company is now able to bid on contracts and perform whatever it is they do. If you're not procurement ready, I'd suggest very strongly you contact your local PTAC for help. They're set up to do just that, and usually really good. Plus, it's free. So don't pay a consultant or anyone promising you that they'll get you work. I can't stress this enough, how much time and energy the PTACs will save you. They'll even help you put a bid together. Doing work with the VA really is not much different than what you do in the private sector. The same things that matter there will matter to the VA. Don't worry about building that bicycle shed until you first figured out the business. Okay, now that I've beaten this point to death and then some, here is what I'd like you to focus on. Next slide, please. I'm going to dive a little deeper into some of the important business considerations I've mentioned previously. Be pragmatic. Ask yourself these questions. Does the VA buy what I sell? The easiest way to find this out is go to sam.gov. And oh, by the way, all of these places have links at the end of this presentation, so don't worry about it now. Anyway, go to sam.gov and search contract opportunities. I've included this in other links as stated, but you'll not only see what agencies buy, but even better, you can see procurement history. Go there and see if agencies are buying what you're selling and who the government is buying it from and at what price. As a former small business owner in the private sector, I know this information will be really important to me and probably to a lot of you. Who's the competition? What are they getting paid? Yeah, take advantage of this. Okay, if the government doesn't buy what you sell, would they consider it? Just because you don't see a contract asking for it doesn't mean that they wouldn't want it. For instance, let's say you have a unique product or service. Ask yourself if it would benefit the VA and how. Does it cut down on the number of infections, for instance? Do I have an advantage? Does my company have a sustainable competitive advantage? If you're selling everyday light bulbs, for instance, it's going to be difficult for you as this essentially becomes a commodity and has numerous suppliers. On the other hand, if you sell ones that, let's say, save more energy or last longer, then you have a far greater chance for success. Who am I competing against? There's a lot to consider here. Your competition may compete for different reasons than yours. Again, go into sam.gov and under contract opportunities, find out who the VA has awarded work to in your particular line of business. I could babble about this for a while, but I'll spare you. Next slide, please. After you're satisfied that doing work with the VA is a good business decision and you've become procurement ready, you're going to have to know how the VA buying process works and who the players are and how the VA is set up. This is where many people get confused and end up trying to solicit or sell to the wrong people. Even the VA people don't understand this. The number one question everybody has is, who do I speak with? Essentially, who do I have to sell or convince? Now, I'm oversimplifying this, but it is nevertheless how things work. Again, for small business purposes, think of the VA as two entities, the VISN and the NCO. The VISN is the hospital side. These are the decision makers. Let me say that again because it's that important. The VISN people are the decision makers. They're comprised of the doctors, the nurses, the business manager, the facilities people, the head of maintenance, the medical center director, and so on. These are the users, directly or indirectly, of your product or service. These are the people that would see and understand the value in your product and service. Again, if you'd ask a group of VA people who the decision makers are, you get many different answers, surprisingly. Anyway, here are some examples of what I'm talking about. Let's say a small business is trying to sell surgical sponges. Who do you think the SBA would, or the small business would want to speak with? It would be the doctors and the surgeons, perhaps some of the nurses. Let's say your business repairs commercial air conditioning units. Who do you go to? Probably the head of maintenance or somebody tied to maintenance. What if you're a consultant and developed a system that teaches healthcare employees to be more efficient? You'd probably want to see somebody high up in management, like a medical center director. These are the people who make these kinds of decisions. On the other hand, the NCO, who I'm a part of, the Network Contracting Office, creates contracts and administers them. They do this for the VISN, and they are not the users of the products and services. These are not the decision makers, as many in the VA would have you believe. I'm not a decision maker, neither are the contracting officers. Again, I'm in the NCO. I'm not particularly sure why I'm not in the VISN, because it would make more sense, but to be a gatekeeper for VISN people, but until things change, we work with what we have. So let me take you through a typical procurement. First, someone in the VISN needs something. Let's say the dental department needs new instruments, or somebody in the facilities department needs a chiller repaired, or the radiology department needs lead shields, and so on. Then these VISM people, the users of the product or service, would perform market research. Think of market research as shopping. That's all it really is. What do you do when you need something? You can order online, or you can search the internet and read reviews, or look for the best price, or look for an alternative source, or ask others and find out who sells this or who performs these services. It's really similar to what the VISM people do. They may like what they're using now or may want something better or different. Every situation is different, just like you and I. What makes you pick a certain product over others or hire one service over another? In general, the VA doesn't have a master list of approved vendors that you need to get on. Again, they're just like you and I when we need something. Sometimes we have numerous choices, and sometimes perhaps we only have one. Anyway, the decision maker identifies the need and puts in a request by sending a form and description of what they want to the contracting people. The NCO, quite often, they will receive something from the VISN that lists a specific brand or a specific vendor that they'd like to use. So I hope by now you see who the real decision makers are. Next, contracting gets this. They get this request and they do their own market research. They not only check the suppliers that the VISN people suggested, but they search the market for other suppliers. Can another company offer the same item or provide the same service? And if so, at what price? Contracting people always want competition, and their market research is usually much deeper and broader than the VISN. However, and this is important, the contracted people do not change the specifics of a product or service or alter the requirements of a product or service that the VISN people requested. The VISN folks are the drivers and the experts. Hopefully, now that you see the VISN people or program side are the real decision makers. Contracting, on the other hand, wants to maximize competition, if there is any. So the VA gets the greatest value. Next, the NCO issues a solicitation, which you'd find on sam.gov. And it essentially tells all vendors, this is what we want. It has to do this and it has to do that. Then the NCO gets offers or quotes. After going through all the offers, if there are any, sometimes there aren't, the CO creates the contract, makes the award, and administers the contract throughout its life. Somewhere in there, I review the contracts to make sure that we identify all possible small business vendors like you. We make sure that you guys are included. Okay, now that you understand the procurement process and how the VA functions, albeit a little bit oversimplified, let's look at some tips and advice to maximize your chances. Next slide, please, Josh. First, put yourself in the place of a decision maker. This could be a doctor, nurse, head of facilities, business manager, and ask yourself, why would I want your product or service? Why should I take the time to listen to you? What you should do is try to solve a problem, make life easier for someone, improve safety, for instance. Your potential customer is usually really busy. You must give them a good reason to listen. Don't just try to sell them what they're already buying from others, unless you can differentiate your product or service. The VA, unfortunately, leads some people to believe that once you become procurement ready, oh, you just sit back and get contracts. And it's not like that at all. Anyway, this leads me to my next important tip. Specialize, specialize, specialize. If you're selling bags of sand, good luck. But if you have, let's say, a robot that can zap germs efficiently, or a unique way to reduce pain without the use of drugs, then you've got a much better chance of being successful. It's very similar to selling in the private or corporate world. You need to give them a reason to listen to you. So don't get thrown off track. A capability statement is a 1 or 2 page document outlining your company's value proposition. In most cases, you don't need physical copies. You do need this, however, in electronic format. So it can be sent to anyone at any time very easily. Keep your capability statement relatively simple and clear, concise. Articulate that you're a small business, what your company sells, and briefly, essentially, why it's so great. This is what you'll email me, which I will go through and distribute to the most appropriate people, hopefully the decision makers. And by the way, the P-techs are great at helping you with things like this. Think of your capability statement as a silent salesperson. Next, we have a working website. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to state what you do, what you're selling, your capabilities, and anything else that would be important to a potential customer. Choose the most appropriate NAICS codes. Don't list 50. You can't be an expert in everything. Choose 3 or 4 overlapping NAICS codes so your company will show up when a PDM or procurement decision maker is searching for your product or service. Make sure your emails designate your company as a small business. You'd be surprised at the number of emails I get every day that I have to ask. This is a big one. If possible, quantify the benefit of your product or service. This is very important. And now I'm speaking as a business person here. Rarely does anyone ever hear this advice in federal government contracting, but this would really help. Anyway, try to quantify the benefit of your product or service. This is exceptionally important. Every vendor qualifies what they sell by saying how great it is in some manner, but few quantify the value. Try to boil your products or services down to measurable benefits. For instance, this will save you X number of dollars over 5 years, or this will decrease infections by 10%. These kind of things give the buyer, the PDM, support to buy your product or service. Make it easy for them to say yes. For example, the big insurance companies do the same thing. Geico, Progressive constantly tell us they could save $500, and nobody seems to question them. Small businesses rarely do this, but they should. In most cases, it's not difficult to do. If you have trouble with this, speak with someone at the P-Tech or a business major who might have learned this as an undergraduate in college, like I did. Search the internet for relevant statistics. For instance, you might be able to identify the average repair cost of a typical machine over 5 years. You'd be surprised what you can find on the internet. While your machines may be more expensive up front, in an example, consider things like how often the machine requires servicing. And given the time value of money, you might be able to claim that the cost of your machine over 5 years is actually $4,000 less. This is just one example, but this can be accomplished in many different ways. Another example, for instance, might be to say something like, well, this saves your nurses 20 minutes a day. This gives your VA PDM more backing to select you. It would be quite intriguing to them. PDMs would feel a lot better about working with you if you have some measure of past performance. And I know this isn't always the case, but whether you've done work with the VA or another agency directly, or perhaps as a subcontractor, or even if you've never done any kind of work with the government, you probably have similar projects that you've done. Use this. Next slide, please. Lastly, and this is very important, and I gave it its own slide, get an audience with a procurement decision maker. This is obvious, I know, but it's difficult. Do the best you can. I've identified who those people are, and believe it or not, that's a big step forward. This is where you'll utilize your business skills and savvy and creativity to get in to see a PDM, or at the very least, get their contact information. The PDMs are very insulated, but that's by design. Quite often, it's difficult for me to identify them or even get their contact information, as strange as that is. Remember, I'm on the NCO side, the contracting, not the VISN side. The VISN people are our customers. And that's one of the reasons why I don't break down the door and develop close relationships with them, because the NCO4 doesn't allow me to do so. So it is possible to get an audience with them. For instance, when small business conferences are held, or when we or others might host an industry day and the PDMs actually take part. So that's a couple ways you can get in to see them. Another way you might be able to get your information into the hands of them, the PDMs, is through me. Email me your capability statement, and I will forward this to most appropriate people. And I'll ask around and see if I can get as close as I can. And if not, I'll give them to my branch chiefs who deal with the VISN folks. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to get that to a PDM. And again, keep in mind that PDMs are somewhat insulated from me as well. You might even want to use a little creativity and try social media, perhaps LinkedIn. I'm not sure. Lastly, OSDBU, that's the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Don't worry about that. Has a direct access program. This is supposed to offer unique opportunities for small businesses to build partnerships, to maximize networking, and to gain access to procurement decision makers through direct access events. They hold these. The link is on this slide and at the end of the presentation. So I'm not sure how effective they are in doing this, but boy, it's worth a shot. So go to that link and just poke around there for a while and see if anything is coming up, or reach out to OSDBU and ask them. And honestly, keep it plain. Say, this is what I do. I sell this, or I do this, and I want to speak to a procurement decision maker. And if they send you to contracting, run away. Okay, so now that you understand the procurement process and how the VA functions, as well as the players and what they'd be interested in, let's look at some approaches you could take to identifying or finding work. Next slide, please. Okay, keep in mind that this slide is certainly not typical government language. Rather, I took the liberty of articulating this into terms that business people might better understand. So the first approach I want you to consider is the most common by far. And it's what I refer to as going in the front door. It's a reactive approach. SAM.gov is the website where contract opportunities are posted. This is where typical business would search for jobs to bid on. The government posts a need, an opportunity, and you and others react to it. Think of this as the front door to getting work. This is where the vast majority of vendors find and win opportunities. Keep in mind, however, that it might be the 10th company to bid on the same opportunity. So you might want to think of it as getting in line to sell your goods, albeit behind 10 other vendors. This is why I tout specializing. There is a chance, however, that yours may be the only company bidding. You just don't know. It depends upon what you're selling and what the VA is buying. In this type of effort, you really don't need to contact the PDM, because You're just bidding on an opportunity that's already advertised publicly via SAM. The next approach, and far more difficult, but perhaps much more lucrative, is what I define as going in the side door. It's the proactive approach to getting business, something I much prefer. Try to get an audience with a Vision PDM, as I've stated previously, and get them to see your product or service as a must-have. This is where you articulate the unique value of your product or service. This is where you put yourself in the place of the decision maker and give them something that's important to them, instead of waiting at the front door behind others and bid on what everybody else is bidding on. You go into the side door and convince the buyer that they need what you're selling. Then that might identify what you're selling as a need and submit a request to contracting. It's also possible that all of this can be avoided and a Vision person whips out a government issued credit card and buys your product. This would be a micro purchase. The limit is up to, I believe it's 10,000, depending upon what they're buying, although it might have risen temporarily to 20,000 because of COVID. But my point is there's no need for the government to create a typical contract. But again, it is really important to specialize. And as I recall business, I do not want to sell what everybody else is selling, because then your product or service becomes a commodity and you're bidding on price. That's the last thing that I wanted to do. You know, your products or services are special. Make them unique, make them more valuable, and be able to articulate why they're valuable. Okay, another option for doing work with the VA or the federal government is to test the waters first, so to speak, by working as a subcontractor for the prime contractor or winning bidder. Subnet is where you might find some of these prospects. It's a website hosted by the VA that lists subcontracting opportunities. It's really easy to search. Point of contact is also listed, as is their contact information. So it's a really low risk, time saving way to start working with a VA, albeit indirectly. So subcontracting really is an easier way to get your foot in the door. For perhaps an even greater number of subcontracting opportunities and more relevant, go to sam.gov and use the advanced search tab and search both active and past procurements. Here, you'll be able to find the winning bidders of projects. Contact them for subcontracting opportunities. The PTACs can most certainly help you with this. And I'm sure they can point out other ways to find subcontracting opportunities. But the information, especially the historical information in sam.gov, would be exceptionally important to me as a small business. I'd love to have that insider information on the private sector, you know? So sometimes OSDBU and government agencies host small business conferences. At these, you may actually get to meet and speak with the PDM, as I believe I've mentioned before. Definitely take advantage of this. On the SBA's website, you can also access the directory of federal government prime contractors who have subcontracting plans. These are the prime contractors that have plans to use subcontractors because by law, some contracts are required to subcontract a certain percentage of work to small businesses. X% to small business, X% to women-owned small business, X% to hub zone, and so on. So while I might be missing other avenues, this is how I envision different approaches to identifying or finding work from the VA or other federal government agencies. So again, most people go into sam.gov and they look at the existing opportunities, and I get that. That's how a lot of small businesses are built to do so. But, again, my take is that I'd rather be more specialized and give the VA something they don't have, something that's valuable, and approach it that way and say, look, this is so good. And if you impress somebody, they're going to want that. And sooner or later, they're going to get it from you. And I understand it's hard to do to get in to see them, but as I've stated, there are a few ways. And until somebody like me can get on the visit side and be the gatekeeper and listen to all of you and take your information and divvy it out to the right people, we have to do this. But anyway, next slide, please. Okay, lastly, what I'd like you to take away from all this, if nothing else, is that doing business in the corporate world and private industry, selling your goods or services, why you're successful, will be the same reasons why you're successful doing work with the VA. The value of your products and services and your ability to articulate this to the right people are the reasons why you'll get work. Focus on your business, your products or services. Don't get caught in, oh, I've got to be registered here, I've got to go this, and I have to sign this, and I have to get this different NAICS codes, and don't do that. If your business is really good and you have really good products and services, and you can articulate why they're better, you will get work. And eventually you can do that red tape, but make sure you tackle the business side of it first. Last slide, please. Finally, geez, I'm getting tired of hearing myself speak. Here are the websites I've mentioned and their links. My email is listed here as well. And as you can see, I've got my email address highlighted in a couple of places in the presentation, because email is by far the best way to get your information to me so that I can send it to others. Even if I had time for phone conversations, how am I going to pass that along, everything you've told me, to other people? I mean, the VA is huge. That's why you want to email me and perhaps send me a capability statement so that I can easily pass it on to others. You certainly know your product and service better than anybody. And those decision makers who you want to contact will understand your product or service certainly better than I. So yes, send me your capability statement and email it. And whenever you converse with any government people, get their email. I think this is far more effective in getting a response. So that's really all I have. I really want to, I know I was repeating myself, but only because what I've mentioned is so important. So if you're too bogged down, try to reprogram yourself and go, and say, take a look at your products and services and make sure they're better, and make sure you can do something other than just to say, hey, they're better. Don't just try to save the VA money unless it's a lot of money. So that's why I've repeated things several times. It's really that important. So anyway, thanks for your patience. Thanks for allowing me to babble and for your time. And that's really all I have, Josh.
All right. Well, thank you for babbling. You did an excellent job, and it was pretty informative. I know we have some questions in the chat, so I'll go ahead and let Dominique manage the Q&A.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I have to second that. That was very, very informative, even for us. Richard, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I think this we're going to have to kind of reevaluate how we even approach our clients with this type of information, because this is really, really Yeah, this just kind of blew the lid off of how we've been helping our clients. So thank you. So we do have several comments and a lot of them are coming in. So I'm going to try and get through them. So the first question is from Margaret, and actually she has two. So I'm just going to ask them together. What are the steps the contracting officer takes to find potential vendors, and how detailed should the past performance be?
Good question. The contracting officer, the CO, looks everywhere. Okay, there are a lot of COs out there. We have many, and they're usually specialized. They're usually put in one area of their expertise. They will look at everything from VIP, where veteran-owned small businesses get registered. They will look on the SBA site, Dynamic Small Business Search. They will look through sam.gov. They will look at the information, their capability statement that I have that you've sent me. They will look at those because I send them to COs. And I know I'm missing a lot here. I'm just brain block. Josh, where else would they get that kind of information?
I think the best place is, just ask your local PTAC. It's like a case by case basis. It really depends on the business, I think, and how you can best utilize your time looking for information.
Yeah, and again, there isn't these four things that they go to. Every CO is different, and again, it's just like you and I when we want to buy something and shop. Like, you may take a totally different tact. It's the same way with the COs, the same way. And I'm sorry, what was the last part of the question, Dominique?
How detailed should past performance be? I think this was in reference to the capability statement bit.
I believe it should be more simple than on the complex side. I think if you know what you're bidding on, or you know the kind of work you do, you probably know what would be really important to the users of this. So speak to that. It's sort of like if you have a resume that you're sending in for a job, you sort of want to match your resume to what that job entails. So you sort of want to match things as best you can. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, good question. We actually have a capability statement webinar coming up in January, and we do talk about that. So just putting that out there.
I'm sorry. One more thing. The CEOs also go online and look to search Google for products and services. So that's another reason why it's important to have a website, because we buy some really odd things. So, we search those things, and if you're selling one of those, chances are, we'll find you.
Awesome. So next question is from Bruce. So he asked, do NCOs and or VISNs prefer the VAFSS as a contracting vehicle?
I think so. And the reason, because it's a lot easier for us, because the price is already there. And it's the products and services on the federal supply schedule essentially have already been vetted. In other words, government agencies have used them. And so people feel safe about that because, other people have used them. So it's not nearly as big of a risk if you're buying that, if you're responsible for that. However, whatever you do, don't spend time getting on the federal supply schedule first. Save that for only if necessary. Because what happens is people may spend a long time getting on the federal supply schedule, and they get on and they either find out there are 20 other vendors on there, or nobody's buying that, or there's another vendor on there and the price is half what ours is, or for any number of reasons. And I review contracts all day, every day. And I usually review them because they're not going to small business. So I sort of act like the small business police and make sure that small business was considered. And I do not see very many on the federal supply schedule. For simple things, yes. But keep in mind that the VA buys so many specialized items. And again, I would prefer not to have my product or service as a commodity. And I'm not saying everything's a commodity on the FSS, but again, I want to convince the buyer that like, hey, I'm the only game in town. And you know what? If you're a business, if you're a smart business, you can do that. So you can get on the federal supply schedule, but definitely look around and make sure that that's what you want to do.
Gotcha. Hopefully that answers your question, Bruce. So Felicia just had a comment. She said, I worked for the VA for 9.5 years, a great organization to work with. So thank you for that, Felicia.
Yeah, it really is. And I have to say, I feel completely privileged to work for them. I really do.
Okay, so next question, Karen. I think this might be a question you might want to email Richard about, but I'll just go ahead and say it just in case someone else has a similar question. So she's asked, we are a 95 employee dental lab that is SAM, CPARS, DUNS registered and meet all qualifications mentioned with one VA property as a client. We have been told we cannot solicit additional VA properties. They say that it contaminates the process. We must have a national vendor status. Is there any such status? And I know I read that fast, so if I need to reiterate.
You know what? I'm not sure, but please, you have my email. Send me that question. That being said, that doesn't sound right. Because especially the fact that you've done work for VA once is awesome. I mean, that and not only for several reasons. First of all, a CO, if a CO wants to award something to you, they can rest easy. It's a lot easier because they know there's much less risk. You've done it before. That's why. For a brand new vendor, it's a little more difficult. But yeah, the contaminate the buying process, yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not saying it's not right in some way, but send me that, and you may just be getting the wrong information. You would be surprised how much disinformation is out there. And it's not because people aren't being honest. It's really because they don't know. They've worked in the federal government for their entire life, and that's all they know. They don't know how to do business. And so, and not only that, but everybody in the VA, some people have their own little chiefdoms, and they do things the way they want to do. I always would say, the VA is really consistent with its inconsistencies. What a contracting officer might do, let's say, an Erie, PA, a CO in Pittsburgh might do completely the opposite. And the same goes with if we do something in NCO4 one way, or let's say if the logistics person handles hiring, I don't know, elevator repair people, an NCO4. Somebody else, the facility people, might be the person to go to in NCO 10. So it is difficult, but it's tough. Take every information that you get from the federal government employees with a grain of salt. So please do send me that question.
All right, awesome. So Michelle, I think, asked if a doctor at a VA reaches out to us about using our product, what is the next steps? I think that's kind of a loaded question, right?
Yeah, I tell you what, if a doctor reaches out for your products, you're doing something right. I mean, that's the best case scenario. And it's funny, and don't think things are so specialized that that sounds like too intricate or that too complicated for me. That's not true. I live in Pittsburgh, and I know this small company town. I think they were in place called Blawnock, just a wee little town. And this was really a small business, and they made specialized surgical sponges. And the reason why they got into that is because initially they started a business. Okay, you know, we have some background, we're gonna make surgical sponges. And they got to talk to a doctor, and they asked the doctor, and I'm simplifying this, but they asked the doctor essentially, hey, what do you need? What is your problem when you use surgical sponges? What would you like to see? And, back and forth went, and boom, they created these specialized surgical sponges. And all of a sudden, the VA started buying them. So if a doctor reaches out to you, quite honestly, just keep in contact with them, and perhaps, even email me that. I mean, say, Dr. So-and-so reached out to me, and so what I'll probably do is talk to my branch chiefs, because if that doctor wants something, that doctor will probably not directly, indirectly reach out to the branch chiefs. So saying that, you know what, ask the doctor, say, well, if you request this, like, who do we go to? Dr. So-and-so, who are you requesting this from? Who is the person that you go to start the ball rolling? And if if it's somebody in the VISN, ask the doctor for his or her contact information, if that makes any sense. But that's a good scenario, believe me.
Absolutely. So Bruce asked, what is the role of the Office of Acquisitions and Logistics, and are they helpful to small businesses?
They certainly have a small business component. And that office, it's huge. It's gigantic. So, I mean, you could go up online and look, and I'm sure they'll say something very clever, and this is what we do, but it'll all be very generalized. And yeah, so it's just huge. And so, yeah, there is a small business component, but that as an entity is not the driver. You really have to dig down deep to people like me and the COs and the people in the visit. So try not to think of it in that broad of terms, because honestly, it's just too broad.
Gotcha. So Laura asks a really, really good question. She says, is there a way to get contact info or emails for the PDMs?
Okay, that's the $64,000 question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? And again, the VISN people are our customers, the NCO. And so we're kind of told, oh, hands off, you can't badger your customers. You're doing work for them, you're creating contracts. But honestly, that's where I should be. And that way I could listen to all your pitches. I could take your capability statement all day, every day. And I could, sift through what's important, what would be meaningful, what would be worth sending a VISN person. And so to get their contact information, again, just go through the slide and any way you can. Sometimes you have to be really creative, because they're insulated. They're very insulated. And that's why at really big conferences, you may get a PDM. And that's why if you get a hold of OSDBU or any other entity, ask that question. Sometimes look for the keywords industry day. And industry days, the doctors and nurses and the folks that work in the VISN, they participate most of the time. And so you can actually display your wares or your services. And because of COVID, it's all been done virtually. But you may want to search that term industry days and VA. Get a hold of OSDBU and ask them about, hey, when are the next industry days? Yeah, and and again, go through me, and I will do the best I can to get the information. But as you might understand, like, we can't just, oh, here's a list of all of these people. I mean, like, for instance, I know the prosthetics manager in the VISN. So that's really helpful. And I don't have an issue with sending them stuff, but obviously there's a lot of people. So that is the $64,000 question. And I know those aren't good answers, and I would change it if I could. And I've tried. So.
Nah, we always get questions like that. What's contact info for contracting officers, yada yada, and we never have any leads for that. So
yeah, and you can understand that's why, like, I've been to conventions where there are like 4,000 people, and if I'm speaking in a room, people are so confused. There's so much information. There's too much, and that's why try to compartmentalize these things. That's why just concentrate on your business. Make sure you have that correct, because at some point in time, you'll probably get to meet, albeit briefly, a PDM. So make it count. But it is really confusing. That's why you have to focus on the right things, and try to find a PDM. But before that, make sure you have all your ducks in a row.
Absolutely. So Laura asked another question. I want to say that this might be like a follow-up to something you might have said, but she says, what about NAC, SAC, and RAC?
Oh, those, the NAC, the SAC, and the RAC, those are sort of like NCOs, but they're specialized. And those three entities supply all the NCOs. And usually their purchases are more strategic in nature, especially the SAC. That's the Strategic Acquisition Center. And the NAC is a National Acquisition Center. The NAC is not so specialized. The NAC sort of is like the Federal Supply Schedule. In fact, I believe it is part of that. So you can approach them as well. But again, I believe that they are really far removed from procurement decision makers. I could be wrong. You could get somebody that's connected, but that's what I would say. You can approach them, but I believe they're much more of an umbrella.
Got it. Okay, so Josh asked a question that you pretty much touched on. Basically, Josh, it sounds like you'd have to essentially go through someone like Richard in order to essentially get to the PDM. But Josh's question is, from your experience, what is the best way to find the correct PDM, and are they first instructed? What is wanted from the VISN decision maker? Do you target them at the same time?
Don't worry about us in contracting, because essentially we are going to wait for the PDM. However, do send me your capability statement, and there's a chance that I can get it into the right hands, a PDM. And again, it's not always easy because I come across to them as a salesperson, like I'm soliciting them. I mean, I'm better than that, but send me your capability statement. And again, contact OSDBU and make sure you use the term procurement decision maker and not someone in contracting. You could actually say that. Say, look, I don't want to send my information to contracting. They're not the decision makers. These are the people who are. I need a procurement decision maker. And by the way, when businesses get procurement ready, they register here and they do all this and they cut through the red tape. The VA, I think, sends the wrong message. And because of that, once companies get procurement ready, they expect, oh, well, you get a contract. It's not like that. So a lot of small businesses have these expectations that, well, I'm registered everywhere. Okay, now I get a contract. No, it's not like that. And I think the VA, the environment here, we send off those vibes, and that is not the case. And that happens a lot. In fact, it's interesting. OSDBU sent all of the small business people that work for the VA in the country, they sent them a question: why are some of these businesses complaining to us that they're not getting work? Because they expect to get work. And it's funny, I don't think anybody wrote in and said, well, it's because you're telling the wrong thing. So, I had to write in, I think it was like a 3-page essay or something. And it's because they're not focused on the business. It has nothing to do with being procurement ready. You have to be better. Just like it's just no different in the private sector. You have to be better than somebody else or different in some way. It's no different. So don't focus on the wrong things.
Laura, she just had a comment. She said that their product GlowTran is on the FSS schedule and it did take them a year. So just to give you guys some perspective, it can take a long time to get on there. So Margaret asks, please direct us to where we can find the list of government SBA specialists.
Oh, let's see. I have that. It's a link. It's on OSDBU. It's a website. Dominique, how do I get that to everybody?
If you can send that to me, I'm going to send everyone a follow-up with the slides and the recording. So just
Okay,
send that to
great.
me right after this, and I can just put it right in there.
Great. I will do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, because there's a complete list.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so Kamar asks, are freight services utilized at the VA?
Sorry, freight services?
Yes.
I'm not sure, but probably in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure how. And given this age of COVID where everything's scarce, now may be a good time to find out, because there aren't enough truck drivers and so on. But I don't know. I really don't know. You know what? Send me that email and give me a couple days, because I get a lot of emails, and I will get back to you.
Awesome. Okay, great. And a lot of people are just saying thank you. Someone said best Zoom meeting I have attended in years. Bravo, well done.
Hey,
so
you know what? That's wonderful. And I have to say that I really like helping people. I really do. And so I really get frustrated because so many people are steered in the wrong direction. So don't let that other stuff in. Focus on what you need to do, and then worry about getting in to see somebody. And I believe me, that's very kind. And it would be nice if the higher ups in the VA knew that. So, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're a little over, so sorry, Richard. We're actually sorry to everybody. We're kind of, but if anyone has any final questions, I'm gonna give you a minute to put them in the chat. But Richard, I think we're gonna have you back for another session.
Hey, that'd be great.
Awesome. Because a lot of people, they registered late. So I had to do a lot of manual registrations, but I think this will be a great session to hopefully do more widespread, maybe like across Pennsylvania or something like that. So We'll definitely have you back.
Okay, that'd be great. And I have to say, I love the VA. The mission is the greatest, but I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying they don't know what they're doing. Okay, essentially, somebody in small business once asked me, somebody very high up, they said, well, what would you do differently? I said, I would just send me, have me take over the small business, and I'll set everybody straight. But obviously they didn't do that. But yeah, so the VA is a great place to work.
All right. Yep. It looks like there's no more questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off here. Again, thank you so much, Richard. This was a great presentation. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Like I said, as soon as this recording is available, I'll send out the follow-up. And yeah, just keep a lookout for that. And we'll also include some links for our upcoming sessions as well.
Hey, Dominique and Josh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for joining us. And Richard, to your point about just the way the landscape is, sometimes when we're assisting clients, it kind of feels like the blind leading the blind. And, I don't know why federal contracting has to be so difficult. But obviously there's people like you and people like us out there doing the best we can.
Well, yeah, and I'm sorry, here I'm going to babble again, but contracting people in the federal government are classified as 1102. And they are some smart people, believe me. It's much smarter than I. However, small business, they see it through a contracting officer's eyes. And that's what they know. But it's a business. That's what it is. And that's why I was trying to convince the VA to make small business people 1101s, which is classified as general business. So it makes much more sense. But everybody in the VA approaches small business through the eyes of contracting.
One day, there will be a solution to that problem. And once again, no one will listen. No one listens to me either, Richard.
There we go. Well, listen, thanks you guys. And thanks everybody. I appreciate your patience and hearing me babble.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Signing off now. Keep a lookout for that email.